Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished members of the bar, seniors, colleagues, learned friends, and welcome to the second National Data Protection Symposium, Safeguarding Privacy in the Age of Intelligence, from Legal Compliance to Ethical Innovation. The event is about to begin, ladies and gentlemen. Our chief guest, along with the other dignitaries who will be escorting him to the hall, are lined up at the door. Kindly bear with us. We will begin shortly. Thank you. And one small announcement to all those enjoying their refreshments outside, please make your way into the hall so that we can begin this event.
In keeping with our time-honored traditions and to the resounding rhythm of the ceremonial drums, we are deeply honored to announce the arrival of our chief guest, His Lordship Justice Arjuna Obesekara, Judge of the Supreme Court, accompanied by the President of the Bar Association of Sri Lanka, Mr. Rajiv Amarasuriya.
Ladies and gentlemen, please rise from your seats as we welcome our chief guest for this evening, His Lordship Justice Arjuna Obesekara, for the second National Data Protection Symposium.
In a world defined by data, algorithms, and digital networks, we begin today by honoring an age-old tradition that reminds us of our enduring values, the lighting of the oil lamp.
Ladies and gentlemen, to light the ceremonial oil lamp, we now invite, of course, our chief guest, Judge of the Supreme Court, His Lordship Justice Arjuna Obesekara. Also, we invite the President of the Bar Association, Mr. Rajiv Amarasuriya, Treasurer of the Bar Association, Mr. Pasindu Silva, Chairperson of the National Data Protection Symposium, Mr. Rivan Veerasinghe, Chairman of the Data Protection Authority and CEO of the Colombo Stock Exchange, Mr. Rajiva Bandaranayake.
We invite the President of the Computer Society of Sri Lanka, Mr. Heshan Karunaratne, Advisor on Tech Law, Privacy and Digital Policy, Mr. Jayantha Fernando, Acting Secretary of the Ministry of Digital Economy, Mr. Varuna Dhanapala, Chairman of the NIBM, Dr. Gunathilaka Tantirigama, Founder and Chief Architect of ZAPI, Mr. Prabhat Aryaratne.
Thank you very much, gentlemen, and I now invite the members to take their seats at the head table, starting with our Chief guest, His Lordship Justice Arjun Sekara. And to join him at the head table, I cordially invite the President of the Bar Association of Sri Lanka, Mr. Rajiv Amarasuriya, the Treasurer, Mr. Pasindu Silva, President of the Computer Society of Sri Lanka, Mr. Heshan Karunaratne, Advisor on Tech Law, Privacy and Digital Policy, Mr. Jayantha Fernando, Chairman of the Data Protection Authority and CEO of the Colombo Stock Exchange, Mr. Rajiva Bandaranayake, and Mr. Rivan Veerasinghe, Chairman of the National Data Protection Symposium.
Please remain standing for the national anthem.
Sri Lanka, Namo, 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 Mata. Sundara Siri Tarini, Surani Ati Sobamana Lanka. Rana Danaya Nikamal Valatulu Iri Jaya Bhumi Ramya. Siri Setta Sadhana, Jeevanaye Mata. Viliganu Mena Apavakti Puja, Namo, Namo, Mata. Apa Sri Lanka, Namo, 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 Mata.
Ladies and gentlemen, I kindly invite each and every one of you to remain standing because before we start today's proceedings, as members of the Bar Association, we are conscious of our responsibility not only to the law, but also to society. And the reason why I respectfully invited each and every one of you to remain standing is to observe 1 minute of silence in memory of the victims of Cyclone Titwa. We know that as we gather here for this symposium today, there are still people who are suffering without a home, people who are suffering after having lost their loved ones and with nothing to their name besides probably the clothes that they wear. So this minute of silence we observe in remembrance of the victims of Cyclone Titwa. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. You may now take your seats.
To warmly welcome our gathering today and to set the tone for today's proceedings, it is my pleasure to invite Mr. Revan Veerasinghe, Attorney at Law, and the Chairperson of the National Data Symposium to deliver the welcome address.
His Lordship Justice Arjun Obesekara, Judge of the Supreme Court, the President of the Bar Association, Rajiv Amar Surya, my learned friends of the Bar, ladies and gentlemen. I'm going to start this discussion, or my talk today, from a philosophical standpoint. I would like to ask the question, as a nation, where do we go from here? The world, as you may know it, is in a very pivotal point in time, especially we as a nation, and also the world as it is. Digitization, as you know, is at the forefront of everything. Commerce is changing. AI is ramping up. It's a part of our existence now, and it's increasing at a rapid pace. Robotics is about to be made mainstream. Social media is an addiction. We live in a strange, strange world. This is also the age of the visionaries, because we have the tools to make industry happen at a very increasing pace. A 13-year-old child now can build a software without knowing code from his household. And products can be 3D printed from your very house. The whole engine of commerce is changing, and it's changing drastically. So I want to ask this question: where do we go from here? And as a nation, what vision do we want to create for Sri Lanka? Peter Drucker, who is a well-known management consultant and guru, said, the best way to predict the future is to create it. I think those are resounding words. But if I'm to create a better Sri Lanka, I try to think up a wish list of what I'd like to create. I'd like to firstly create a peaceful Sri Lanka where everyone is happy, where ease of doing business is high and efficient. I would like to create a thriving economy and a thriving digital economy, where doing transactions is convenient and efficient. We would all like to see an efficient public sector and a visionary private sector. Where do we go from here? So, in the words of Peter Drucker, if we are to create it, how do we go? If I'm to look at my wish list that I just read out, I believe the most or the best solution to moving forward, of course, is digitization. And more than digitization, it's using data to analyze the pain points in the world, the problems in the world, and try to make a better world around us. Therefore, data, by the looks of it, is key to understanding the world's problems and rectifying it. For data drives innovation. Also, data helps you see the pain points, which is fundamental in designing a happier nation. So for innovation and digitization to thrive, we need fundamentally data. And this is why I believe data is so important in today's day and age. The famous mathematician, Clive Humley, said, data is the new oil, for the simple reason that data is known to drive industry. And at this standpoint in Sri Lanka, we need to drive our industry. So fundamentally, data is not a bad thing. Even though data has been villainized around the world, data is not a bad thing. Neither is AI. However, history shows us data the world round has been misused. Hackers have stolen data. People have been manipulated using data. We all know about the famous Cambridge Analytica scandal, where the 2016 election in the US was allegedly rigged on misuse of data and misappropriation of data. And we see this also at a larger scale when we look at our own fears. At a lesser scale, I would say. We are all afraid that our credit card information will be stolen. We are all afraid that our accounts will get hacked, that our phones will get hacked, that our personal pictures will be misused and manipulated. And today, if you look at the day of AI, deep fakes are prevalent. It's all over. It's mainstream. So what do we do? How do we move from here? Is data really bad or is data really good? How do we work around this? Furthermore, how do we transact in this digital age and remain safe at the same time? And if we do transact, what resource do we have, what recourse rather do we have, if someone does misuse or manipulate our precious personal data? There's a perennial question that I'd like to ask. Can we trust strangers with our personal data? Because if the digital world is to happen, can we trust these big companies that we know nothing about with our personal data? But if we do not, can business take place? So the perennial question is, can we trust strangers with our personal data? And if strangers are to do business with us, the question is, can they trust us with their personal data? So if the world is to move on in this new digital age, trust seems to be the magic fabric that goes between transactions. For if we cannot trust strangers, will we do business with them? It's a very fundamental question. And if strangers cannot trust us, will they do business with us? We talk about a global age. We need to transact with the world. Are we trustworthy with their data? Those are the questions I'd like to ask. Therefore, trust, is a vital component for this new future that I envisage for Sri Lanka. And am I wrong by saying that trust is the very fabric that holds technology and advancement together? Am I wrong, furthermore, by saying the greater the trust element in the world, the greater the innovation, and the greater we would be efficient as a nation because people will buy into the system. It is there, and in that backdrop, that data protection comes in. And it is in that backdrop and that understanding that there is a need for the world to trust the systems we rely on, that governments the world over has passed data protection legislation, be it GDPR, and in Sri Lanka, the Personal Data Protection Act number 9 of 2022. It is important for us to understand that basis, because I believe that that buy-in of trust and that buy-in of the legislation would actually drive innovation and our digitization plans forward. And this is why the Personal Data Protection Act is so important. Firstly, it gives people rights. It gives people legal rights that they can stand on and rely on. And it gives data controllers, the big boys that handle all our data, obligations of transparency, obligations of accountability. And most important, it gives a safe space for people to transact in. So, to answer the question I started this speech from, where do we go from here? I believe very strongly the best way to predict the future is to build a safe one to live in. And that is the premise of what we are doing today. Today we have over 200 participants. We have over 28 speakers to create a spirit where we have a meeting of minds, where we have deliberation on issues that really matter, to set forth in a new era of digitization. I think that's why the BSL really spent a lot of time putting this symposium together. And I believe it's a great gathering. I believe we have some fantastic speakers before us for the rest of the day. So I ask you, engage with the speakers, spend some time with the speakers, bounce ideas, contribute to this dialogue, because after all, this is a dialogue where we can build a better tomorrow. I would also ask you to look at your flyers. We are following the process of digitization. We have a number of articles that have been presented by our speakers in a QR code, which can be accessed through online. So please access your folders and check out the articles that people have been kind enough to submit. I thank you for your participation, and I wish you all the best.
Thank you very much, Ravan, for, of course, setting the tone for today's symposium and laying the foundation for the discussions that will take place today, of course, on data protection, and most importantly, as you very rightly mentioned, the element of trust. Ladies and gentlemen, I now cordially invite onto this stage the President of the Bar Association, Mr. Rajiv Amarasuriya, to deliver his address.
Thank you, Shalan. His Lordship, Justice Arjuna Obesekara, Judge of the Supreme Court, Treasurer of the Bar Association, Mr. Pasindu Silva, Chairman of this second National Data Protection Symposium, Mr. Ravan Veerasinghe, Mr. Rajiva Bandaranayake, Mr. Jayantha Fernando, and Mr. Heshan Karunaratne, former Acting Chief Justice, Shirani Tilakavardhana, who is also present with us today, distinguished invitees, ladies and gentlemen. A very warm welcome to all of you on behalf of the Bar Association of Sri Lanka to the second National Data Protection Symposium of the Bar Association of Sri Lanka. May I take this opportunity to extend a very warm and special welcome to our chief guest, His Lordship Justice Arjuna Obesekara, not only for gracing this important conference and symposium with his presence, but also for agreeing to deliver the keynote address this morning. We are deeply grateful to His Lordship for his continued encouragement with the subject and for his consistent support of the initiatives of the Bar Association. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the second National Data Protection Symposium following the inaugural symposium held in 2022. That first symposium itself emerged from a conversation that Mr. Jayantha Fernando and I had at the time on the growing and urgent need for a structured national dialogue on data protection and data privacy in Sri Lanka. We were honored to have Justice Obesekara as a chief guest at that inaugural event as well, and we felt it was most fitting to invite His Lordship once again, 3 years later, as we reflect on the progress made and the challenges that remain to be resolved. We are truly appreciative of Your Lordship's kind acceptance to be here today. The first symposium acted as a catalyst in advancing national discourse on data protection and data privacy. Many remarked then that it was a timely intervention. I believe that the second symposium is equally timely. As the day as the day progresses today, I'm confident that you will agree with me. The Bar Association of Sri Lanka, of which many of you are members, and which we regard as one of the most influential professional and civil society organizations and institutions in this country, has consistently taken up causes that are fundamental to good governance, accountability, and the rule of law. And our interventions take different forms. Recently, we wrote to His Excellency the President on the urgent need to strengthen the Right to Information Commission, particularly in terms of staffing and capacity building in terms of resources. and we are confident that these concerns will now receive due consideration. Similarly, we have raised our voice regarding the continuing impasse in the appointment of the Auditor General, as well as our concerns relating to the reconstitution of the Constitutional Council, both of which are vital checks and balances within our constitutional framework. In relation to data protection and data privacy, we recognize that progress is being made and that the direction is broadly the right one. However, it is equally clear that the process has not moved as expeditiously as one would expect, given the scale, complexity, and the urgency of the challenges we face in an increasingly digital society. And at the heart of this discussion lies a broader and more fundamental issue, that is accountability and transparency, which must serve as the backbone of Sri Lanka's digital and AI-driven future. As a developing nation in the global south, Sri Lanka today has a rare opportunity to leapfrog traditional stages of development through the rapid adoption of digital technologies, data-driven governance, and artificial intelligence. If responsibly harnessed, these tools have the potential to transform public service delivery, enhance efficiency, improve access to justice, and unlock inclusive economic growth. Yet, this opportunity comes with an equally compelling responsibility, particularly in the context of the social media ecosystem. Social media platforms today shape public opinion, influence democratic discourse, affect reputations, and increasingly impact mental health and social cohesion. In an AI-augmented environment where algorithms curate content, amplify narratives, and monetize attention, the risks of misinformation, manipulation, profiling, and abuse are significantly heightened. In this context, data protection, accountability, and transparency are not merely regulatory concepts. They are democratic imperatives. The absence of a clear accountability mechanism and transparent governance structures risks eroding public trust, distorting public discourse, and disproportionately harming vulnerable communities. The speed and scale at which harm can occur in the digital and social media space make effective safeguards not optional, but very essential. Therefore, as Sri Lanka accelerates its digital transformation, it is imperative that systems of protection evolve in tandem with technological advancement. Our legal and regulatory frameworks must demand transparency in data collection and processing, accountability in algorithmic and automated decision-making, and meaningful remedies for misuse, particularly within the social media environment, where harm can be rapid, widespread, and of course difficult to reverse. A robust data protection and privacy regime must therefore play a preventive, protective, and confidence-building role, not only safeguarding individual rights, but also fostering a digital ecosystem that is trusted, responsible, and aligned with the values of the rule of law. Unlike some of the other areas I have referred to earlier, data protection and data privacy give rise to multiple schools of thought on regulation, on enforcement, institutional design, and the appropriate balance between innovation and rights. It was in this context that the Bar Association felt the most appropriate course was to convene the second National Data Protection Symposium. And the overwhelming response received reflected in the fact that this symposium is which has become completely sold out, underscores the relevance and urgency of this conversation. We are also pleased to be hosting this event at a new venue, the beautiful Cumulus at Cinnamon Life, as part of our effort to continually improve the platforms through which these important discussions take place. Before I conclude, I must take this opportunity to sincerely thank Mr. Evan Veerasinghe and his committee, who have provided the leadership and direction necessary to bring this symposium together. I also wish to acknowledge the invaluable support of the BSL Program Office, in particular Mrs. Prakalathan Thuresingham, together with the dedicated staff of the Bar Association of Sri Lanka. We have before us a full day of engaging, insightful, and professionally curated sessions, featuring an excellent lineup of speakers and panelists. On that note, I conclude by extending my very best wishes for the success of the symposium and all the participants. A day of insightful, thought-provoking, and meaningful discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Amarasuriya, and for your efforts in guiding the legal profession towards a more accountable and responsible integration of technology to society. As we explore the intersection of technology, data protection, and law, the rule of law remains the guiding framework within which innovation must responsibly evolve. It is now my distinct honor and privilege to invite our chief guest, His Lordship Justice Arjuna Ubesekara, Judge of the Supreme Court of Sri Lanka, to address the gathering.
Thank you. I'm Rajiv Amarasuriya, President, Bar Association of Sri Lanka. Members of the head table, ladies and gentlemen, it's a genuine pleasure to be back here. And I say back quite deliberately. I think Mr. Amarasuriya has already told you that in January 2022, 4 years ago, I stood before the first Data Protection Symposium and spoke about the compelling need to create a futuristic data protection regime for Sri Lanka's emerging digital economy. At that time, the Personal Data Protection Act, or the PDPA as I will refer to it as, was still on the horizon, anticipated, debated, and in many ways aspirational. Back then, the fundamental questions uppermost in our minds were fourfold. First was whether this law would truly safeguard the sovereignty of the individual, the inviolability of what is personal to us. The second was, would it be simple, unambiguous, and agile enough to keep pace with technology? The third was whether the supervisory authority would be independent, fair, and trusted. And finally, and perhaps the most important, was whether this law, in its vision and construction, would strengthen Sri Lanka's competitiveness in a global digital landscape, allowing our people to truly benefit from the digital economy. It was exciting then to speak about the promise of a groundbreaking law, but the privilege of being here today far exceeds it, because in 2022, these questions represented hope. In 2026, it represents urgency, and therefore, this conversation is no longer futuristic. It is immediate and deeply urgent. Sri Lanka is no longer preparing for a digital economy. Sri Lanka is becoming one. Right now, today, and as we speak, QR payments have exploded. The QR is here to stay. You were told that your bundle of material is also via a QR. Mobile wallets are becoming more common than physical purses. KYC has moved from paper files to pixels. Real-time transfers and platform-based commerce are no longer pilot projects. They are the rails of everyday life. And I felt this shift personally a few months ago when I checked into a hotel after a long flight quite late in the night. I was hungry and I thought I must get a snack. And what did I do? I started looking for the room service menu and found that even the room service menu, which was once a simple leather folder with a few pages setting out what's on the menu, had migrated into a QR code. Now, for ordinary people like me, this is not always a welcome development. I stood there thinking, so now my snack also depends on digital literacy. For those of my vintage, trust me, we didn't sign up for this. So there I was, phone in hand, staring at this QR code. I spent a few minutes tilting the phone, angling and rotating the phone before I finally captured the QR. And in that moment, a very ordinary set of thoughts ran through my mind. Thoughts I suspect many of you have had too. I was thinking, what exactly happens when I scan this? Am I opening a simple menu, or am I opening a door to sharing what I usually keep confidential and secure in my phone? I didn't see an explanation. I didn't see a reassurance. I just saw a QR code, and an assumption or perhaps even a quiet compulsion that I must try it if I wanted my snack. This, ladies and gentlemen, is the world that we live in today. It's convenient until the QR does not scan. It's efficient until that OTP never arrives. And it's magical until the Wi-Fi drops at the exact moment you try to make the payment. And behind every one of these moments, every tap, swipe, scan and scroll, something else is happening. I'm losing control of my identity as it is becoming digital. Standing there, I realized something important. It's not QR codes that break trust. It's poor design, weak governance, and user confusion that do. And more importantly, I realized that this is the point where digital trust truly begins. It does not begin with the technology in my hand. It begins with whether I feel confident, protected, and in control of what happens next. Which brings us to the heart of today's conversation and to the North Star we are aiming for. An inclusive, ethical, interoperable, cashless Sri Lanka, where people choose to transact digitally, not because they must, but because they trust the system behind every tap that we make. But let me be very clear. In the digitally transacting Sri Lanka we are striving to build, trust does not emerge because systems are fast, or because apps are convenient, or because connectivity is seamless. Trust emerges when people believe they remain sovereign over their identity and their data, even as they transact at speed. The moment that sovereignty is lost, speed becomes irrelevant because trust collapses. And that trust doesn't collapse loudly, it erodes quietly. In short, connectivity moves data, but trust moves people. And the assurance of privacy is the bridge that connects the two. It is the assurance that what is personal, our personal data, will not be misused, misinterpreted, or monetized without consent. In such an economy, data moves freely because trust moves faster, accelerating adoption and enabling connectivity to deliver its promised economic value. This is why privacy is not a barrier to innovation. Privacy is what allows innovation to scale. Without it, connectivity creates fear, not progress. And let me make this very real. At home, my wife, who spent much of her career in the telecom and technology sector, reads the fine print of every digital service. She does not trust the accept button. She does not trust the pre-ticked boxes. And she certainly does not trust me. Only when I say, it's fine, just click OK. That's the time she doesn't trust me. Now pause and think about that. If an industry insider still behaves this cautiously, what does that tell us about trust? It tells us something crucial. Trust is not automatic. It is not inherited. It must be earned repeatedly. We are entering an era where intelligent systems make decisions humans once made. Algorithms score behavior. Platforms approve transactions. AI determines who gets credit, who gets delayed, who gets questioned. It's exciting, efficient, but is it risk-free? And the answer to the last question, is it risk-free, is no. Because when systems operate without rights, without transparency, without accountability, they can scale harm as efficiently as they scale value. Which brings me to the central truth I want us to hold together this morning. Privacy is the confidence layer of the digital economy. It is not the cost of growth. It is the precondition for growth, the infrastructure that makes people comfortable enough to tap, to pay, and to transact. And if trust is the currency of a cashless future, then the Personal Data Protection Act, the PDPA, is our mint. And this is why the PDPA matters so deeply at this moment. Therefore, do not look at the PDPA as a compliance burden. It is our trust engine. It ensures technology is not just fast, but fair. Not just smart, but safe. And not just powerful, but accountable. When you place the PDPA alongside Sri Lanka's digital economy blueprint, the architecture becomes clear. Growth and governance must move together. One without the other will fail. But here's where we must be honest with ourselves. Law alone does not create trust. Policy alone does not create confidence. In a cashless economy, trust is no longer abstract. It needs to be created in lived experience. It lives in every transaction, every authentication, every decision made by an algorithm or a system. It is experienced when people understand what data is collected and why, when decisions are explainable, when errors are easy to challenge, and when remedies are visible and human. So, ladies and gentlemen, turning law into that lived experience and ensuring that our digital future is interoperable, inclusive, and ethical is a shared responsibility of all of us gathered here today. Because building that trust, which is now GDP linked, a shared national economic asset in this new world, is not the responsibility of any single institution. The PDPA gives us the legal foundation. The digital economy blueprint gives us a strategic direction. But how these are implemented, tested, enforced, and experienced is what will determine whether Sri Lanka merely digitizes or truly earns the trust of its people. So what must change concretely to make it happen? First, let us digest one thing. This change we need is not merely incremental, it's structural. So in a digitally transacting nation, privacy can no longer live in policies while transactions live in apps. Governance can no longer be periodic while payments are real-time. Trust can no longer be cajoled or assumed. It must be earned as a given. Given the time constraints, I shall briefly skim through a few practical priorities before pausing on what I believe most, the AI trust gap, the next frontier we must confront. So I've identified 6 priorities. I'll speak to you very briefly about it. The first, we must build public confidence intentionally and not accidentally. The PDPA gives citizens legal rights, but law alone does not create emotional confidence. That confidence is earned when organizations are transparent about what they collect and why, when regulators enforce visibly and in a timely manner, and when services are designed to explain decisions, not hide them. The second priority is to treat data protection as a design and not paperwork. Too many organizations still treat data protection as a compliance exercise, a box to tick. That mindset destroys value. When privacy moves from the legal team's inbox into the daily work of engineers and product owners, it stops being a cost and becomes an advantage. Third, design interoperability that is safe by default. Interoperability, the ability for wallets, banks, identity providers, merchants, and government systems to connect, is a double-edged sword. Done well, it unlocks enormous value. Done poorly, it multiplies risk and erodes trust faster than any single system ever could. In short, interoperability should reduce friction and not increase exposure. Fourth, make inclusion intentional and practical. If we want a truly national digital economy, we must design for the hotel QR moment I spoke to you about, not just for the ideal user, but meant for a selected few. The fifth priority, demand accountability and ethical innovation. Regulators cannot and should not do this alone. Algorithmic risk must be a board level issue, not a footnote on a risk register. Sixth is to invest in public awareness and not to overpower and not to overwhelm, but to rather empower. Rights only matter if people know they exist and how to use them. Awareness must translate into confidence and not fear. Empowered citizens trust more, and trust drives adoption. And this brings me to the final and perhaps the most consequential shift that must occur if we are serious about succeeding as a digitally transacting nation. We must face head-on an uncomfortable question at the next frontier of the digital economy, artificial intelligence. Is the Personal Data Protection Act on its own enough to bridge the trust gap in an AI-driven economy? Let me be clear, this is not a criticism of the law. It's a reflection of how fast the world has moved. The PDPA gives us a strong foundation, rights, obligations, and guardrails around how data is collected and used. But in an AI economy, trust depends not only on how data is handled, it depends on how decisions are made. AI systems do not just store data, they infer, they predict, classify, and decide. We all know what AI does to the information that we now share. They generate risk scores, behavioral profiles, and eligibility assessments, often at scale, often without a human in the loop, and sometimes without clear explanation even to those who deploy them. So when a citizen is denied credit, flagged for fraud, or treated differently by an automated system, the question he or she will ask is, not was my data collected lawfully, but was I treated fairly, or why was I declined? And that right there is the AI trust gap we must confront. Data protection laws are designed, as we all know, to protect data. Trust in an AI economy is built by protecting people, their dignity, agency, and fairness. AI tests trust, our confidence layer, like nothing before it. So the challenge before us is not simply operationalizing the PDPA. It is how we interpret it, extend it, and complement it for an AI age, so that principles like fairness, transparency, and accountability remain meaningful when machines make decisions. That means explainability must move from theory to practice, and accountability must extend beyond data storage to algorithmic outcomes. Globally, we are still catching up. Some jurisdictions, most notably the EU, have moved early with dedicated AI legislation. International bodies such as the OECD are developing governance principles. But the landscape remains fragmented. Many countries, including Sri Lanka, rely on a patchwork of ethical guidelines, operational standards, and data protection laws. These tell AI how it should behave, but not where AI sits within commerce, who is accountable when things go wrong. When an algorithm denies credit, who explains it? When automated pricing discriminates, who is responsible? When AI systems transact across borders, whose rules apply? This tells us something critical. Readiness is not just about having a law on the statute book. It is about governance that keeps pace with automation, clarity that survives scale, and accountability that citizens can understand and trust. If AI-enabled commerce is to scale safely and predictably, we will need adaptive, future-ready frameworks, technology-neutral laws, continuous review, multi-stakeholder oversight, and regulatory sandboxes that allow innovation while keeping accountability visible. So the real question is not whether the PDPA matters, it absolutely does. The real question is whether we have moved at all in the 4 years since we last stood here discussing its promise. In 2022, we spoke about a future-ready law, one that would underpin a digital economy still taking shape. Today, in 2026, that future has arrived faster than anticipated. AI is no longer emerging, it is embedded. And the question we must ask, particularly of ourselves as policymakers and regulators, is this: has our governance framework evolved at the same pace as our technologies? Because if AI is already shaping credit decisions, fraud detection, pricing, and access to services, then the work of anticipating risks should already be underway. Waiting for problems to surface is not regulation, it is reaction. This is the evolution now required, not to replace a PDPA, but to extend its spirit into an AI-enabled future so that as machines make more decisions, people do not lose confidence. And without that trust, even the most advanced digital economy will stall. So let us see what must be done over the next 24 months if we are serious about moving forward. First, at the policy level, speed matters as much as intent. We cannot rely on yesterday's framework to govern tomorrow's intelligence. The extension of our data protection regime to explicitly address AI-driven technologies is no longer optional. It is a prerequisite for trust. Adaptive, technology-neutral regulation built for evolution rather than performance must follow. Second, the Data Protection Authority must be fully operational, not just in form, but in effect. Citizens must see enforcement that is timely, consistent, and fair. Compliance must be achievable. If good behavior is too complex or too costly, it will never scale. Third, at the organizational level, certain disciplines must become non-negotiable. Data mapping is one of them. If an organization cannot say with confidence where a data element lives, who can access it, and for what purpose, then it does not control that data, no matter what its policy documents state. As AI-based automated systems materially affect people's lives, we must also insist on transparency. Trust breaks fastest when decisions are made invisibly and cannot be questioned. And none of this works without investing in people. Awareness is helpful, but training is what actually changes behavior. In almost every major breach, the weakest link is rarely the technology. It is the human layer. Trust collapses not just when systems fail, but when responses lack understanding. We must also confront a hard truth. Breaches will happen, fraud will happen, systems will fail. The defining question then is not whether we can prevent every incident, but how we respond when things go wrong. So what do I ask of those who are present here in this room today? We have policymakers. They need to keep pace with technology change, and let's give Sri Lanka adaptive, future-ready frameworks that evolve as intelligence evolves. Regulators, provide clarity, consistency, and speed in execution and operational guidance. CEOs and boards, treat privacy and security as strategic investments and not as back-office costs. Technologists, bake privacy and accountability into your design and be candid about what your systems can and cannot do. SMEs and merchants, invest in basic protections using the practical toolkits we must build together. And all of us as citizens, we must read the finer print, ask questions, claim our rights, and demand transparency. We must be active participants, not passive users, until this shared responsibility is truly met. And finally, to the lawyers who are present here today, I say this with affection and with purpose. This is a moment of uncertainty. Yes, there will be confusion. Yes, there will be breaches, and awareness is still uneven. I hope you will resist the temptation to treat this phase as a time to make hay while the sun shines. I urge you not to monetize the confusion, but to help reduce it and build the field first. If we flood the system with trivial disputes before trust has had a chance to take root, we don't strengthen the digital economy, we slow it down. We burden the Data Protection Authority, overwhelm adjudicators, and erode confidence at precisely the moment we need to build it. As custodians of the law, your role here is not just to argue, but to guide us towards a system that is still finding its footing. Help organizations interpret the law responsibly. Help citizens understand their rights clearly. Work together to build legal clarity before legal conflict. Because our North Star is not more litigation. It is a digitally transacting nation that is fair, trusted, and resilient. The work ahead is about choices, about how Sri Lanka chooses to govern intelligence, not just data. And that choice will define whether our digital economy is merely fast or truly trusted. If we get this right, Sri Lanka can do something rare. We can build a digital economy that is not just fast but fair, interoperable and accountable, AI-enabled and trusted. So with many experts due to address you today, including the Chief Architect of Digitization in Sri Lanka, Dr. Hans Vijayasuriya, let me leave you with this final thought. The promise of a digital economy is not measured by how fast our systems move, but by how confident our people feel in using them. A nation does not unlock the true power of technology by being enslaved by it, but by governing it wisely with the right guardrails firmly in place. And when privacy is recognized not as a barrier, but as the confidence layer that multiplies economic value, it becomes a non-negotiable precondition for innovation. That is when technology stops overwhelming us and starts empowering us. That is the digital future worth building. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for a very patient hearing. Thank you.
Thank you very much to our chief guest, His Lordship Justice Arjun Obesekar, for that very insightful keynote address. Of course, drawing parallels from where Sri Lanka was back at the first Data Protection Symposium in 2022 and where we are today in 2026. And throughout the addresses that have continued today, we've seen the trust and confidence being a key theme that stretched across all of the distinguished guests, all their addresses to the audience today. And of course, I believe His Lordship, the Chief Justice, has also made it very clear that change is no longer an option or a choice. It is present and it is happening. And that too was echoed in the keynote address of His Lordship Justice Arjun Obesekar. Thank you very much for that, sir. And of course, in appreciation of taking your time to be present here today and deliver this keynote address, we have a token of appreciation for you. And I cordially invite the President of the Bar Association, Mr. Rajiv Amrasuriya, to hand over that token of appreciation to you right now. Thank you very much, sir, for your contribution to the second Data Protection Symposium. And we also hope to see you at the third Data Protection Symposium once again, sir. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, we will now take a short recess. And when I say short, I do really mean short. We've got many speakers lined up for you today. Revan and his team has taken all the effort to deliver as much as possible to give your time today as much value as possible. Therefore, we will only be giving a 20-minute break, ladies and gentlemen, for the refreshments lined up for you outside. We will resume the symposium at 10:10. Kindly be back in your seats at that time. We'll see you in a bit.